Hey neighbors, the Handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company along with Lord Zed of the Moonsea, Jake Del Maro, and today we're talking about DDEX 3-10 Quelling of the Horde. Writer RPN Lundeen, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, and Travis Woodall. This is a 4-hour mod for Tier 1 play, tuned for 5 third-level characters. Party is tasked to investigate the disappearance of the Arcris family by Goblin Knights. After a brief investigation, the party finds the entrance to the Upper Dark, where the goblins have taken their captives. The party finishes the module with a Goblin Hive Dive, Part 1, Aftermath of Madness. The module starts at the Plotting Plow Inn at the stop, where Glenna Moonsmith puts the party on the task. Two frequently drunk ranch hands come to the stop with the story that Goblin Knights attacked the Arcris ranch and abducted the family. After speaking with the inngoers, the party can investigate the area by exploring several local farms and homesteads. Eventually, the party finds their way to the passage to the Upper Dark, where goblins have taken captives. The party may encounter an NPC from prior seasons, Elisande and her god goat. Jake, we start off, in pretty typical fashion, right? Someone is putting them to a task. Presumably a member of a faction. Yep. Anything particularly interesting here?
I would probably say no. I do like the buy-in is a little more aggressive because there's like a little bit more like, hey, there's potential witches, hey, goblins, hey. There's a lot of breaking of that norm that we consider like the goblin / kobold tier of like, hey, we're gonna go stab you in the face and you die because you got crit. It's a little bit more tactical, societal based goblin like structuring, which makes this a very interesting mod, because like when people think, once again, goblins, they think unorganized. So I do like,
and typically they're not, right? Like they're thought of as unorganized, but typically when you really read the novels and like look at like the descriptions in Volo's Guide and stuff, there's a pretty substantial hierarchy to goblins.
So I think it lends itself to be a little bit better of an intro, being like, well, this is odd because you don't typically put these things together, and is what it is. But right. I do enjoy it being a very engaging mod in that sense. One of the families, witches. Second family, halflings. Third family, the main the Arcris ranch. There's interesting points to take from each one, and it's worth the investigation. And I think it's cool. You get to encounter scarecrows, which are like, they're all about the jump scare. They're all about the coolness that they are. I do like that. I like the halflings. I like the investigation. Leads you to no time constraint, but definitely an interesting situation in this part 1. Nothing really else other than that. I think it's just a pretty straightforward mod. I think a good straightforward mod.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about the investigation component of this is that all of the investigation locations have something relevant.
Yeah.
So often we see these mods with like these elaborate investigations where like 3 or 4 of the 7 locations are like, you don't really find anything, or like you find a clue that you should, or you find a clue that you should go check out this other place that you already knew you should check out. So I think that's pretty interesting. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward here. Part 2, the passage downward. There's a combat encounter with a goblin boss, a couple of goblins, and a pair of death dogs. That's all of part 2.
Have I ever told you how fun goblin bosses are?
Goblin bosses have the coolest monstrous ability
if you
in the game.
Are a D&D DM or player, always play as a goblin, for the fact that you can get shot by an NPC, by your friend, due to an NPC deciding to say no.
Right. Goblin bosses have this cool ability where if they are standing next to a goblin and someone attacks them, they can pull the goblin in front of the attack and redirect it into the goblin boss. Or not. It does not say they have to be friendly. They just get to do it. They just get to say, nope, not me, this guy instead, and it's awesome. Other than that, that is all of part 2. Just passage downward in the Upper Dark, the far less frequently referenced dark part than the Underdark, but it comes up here.
The less Underdark.
Right, the slightly less Underdark. The barely at all Underdark. Anyway, part 3, Skullspike Caves. The party makes their way to a goblin warren in the Upper Dark that's led by a fiendish goblin knight, Lord Agrak, servant of Grazd, and his demonic companions. The party must navigate the warren and deal with several encounters of enemies before facing off against Agrak and his carrion crawler mount. Once the goblins are dealt with and the party can free the captives, they can all return to the surface. I specified deal with several encounters rather than fight several encounters for a couple of reasons. One, if you fought all of these encounters, it would take a very long time. And two, your players would probably not live through it. That is a lot of encounters.
A lot of tough encounters.
Yeah.
I feel like the idea behind this mod was trying to like make it so it forces people to go like, hey, let's not fight this.
Mm-hmm.
Because A, rust monsters, B, giant toads, C, big boars, 10 goblins,
Yeah.
4 more you're like fighting like, then you gotta fight an incubus, a dredge or whatever,
yeah.
dredge, an animated armor, 2 more goblin bosses, a potential pit trap or a
Right.
fire trap that is like 10 damage, and then you gotta fight the boss
All
in
at tier
his
1.
centipede.
Yeah.
Tier 1.
Yeah.
You can take short rests, but good luck.
But
Yeah.
where? There's no like secure areas on that map.
The areas they mention are like in the shanty town and like potentially in like the mushroom field or whatever. Let's be real here. That's super tough.
Yeah. For sure. There's a lot of cool stuff in this mod if your players are members of factions.
Yeah.
One of them is like capturing the rust monsters and bringing them back to the faction. Like there's a lot of kind of faction quests that really make this interesting. It's tough when factions aren't relevant anymore.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can still throw in those components.
Sure.
To get, you know, we've talked at length about favors as rewards.
That's where I'd bring in like the halflings as a potential favor, or the Arcus.
Yeah.
Definitely people that could give potential favors.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it is a scenario where there's opportunity to make lasting decisions as a player.
Mm-hmm.
It just, there's a lot of crap in between once you, and this, well, also let's talk about the tragedy that is 20-foot squares. But
this map is poor. It is a poor map. That is my one largest critique of this module.
It is a very large map.
The map is bad. It is a bad map because it is not to a relevant scale.
They took the whole idea of what is it, hard book maps, and then they doubled it.
They took the problems with the maps of the hard book and doubled down on the failures of the maps in the hard books. Yes. It's not a good map. I take that back. The scaling on the map is bad.
It's a bad scaled map.
Yeah.
Because it makes everything make no sense. Then you're like, oh, scaling,
right.
Yikes.
And like, I don't understand why even Wizards makes these 10 by 10 foot maps in a system that they describe as 5 by 5 foot squares. I don't get it. One day,
what you think about.
Yeah, I don't know. They're not asking me either, so it's whatever. But I don't know. It's tough. You're gonna have to rescale the map and find a way to make it work.
So I guess giving a quick insight for the DMs watching, how this ended up playing out was rust monsters were found. We quelled rust monsters with ideas and stuff, you know, different ideas that my players presented to me. Snuck past a good chunk of the mod because this is if you slog out all the combat, this is a long mod. And not only does it get, it's not like all the hard stuff is in the beginning. It ramps up in difficulty because you go from like rust monsters, frog-toed goblins, goblins plus giant boars, incubus, dread, whatever the heck it's called,
Animated
2 goblin
armors,
bosses,
yeah.
animated armor, and then the boss. It gets harder as you get further in, and your players are going to be less and less in resources. I've been one, which I've since have made mistakes in the past, where you used to blow everything in the beginning, like I'm just going to blow through these combats and no one else to do it. And then like, by the time you get to the last boss, you're at like one spell slot, like barely any spell slots left, or you're struggling.
Yeah.
And
No spell slots, 8 hit
Provide
points.
options, provide opportunities to do skill challenges or whatever it may be, where you killed the boss, where now people just don't want to fight you. Like the people that are there, they're like, oh, well, that's stupid. That sucks.
Yeah.
Make skill checks even afterwards. They sneak past, cool.
They show the Goblin King's head and make a persuasion or intimidation check. Cool.
Yeah.
DC 8, I don't know, like
the Incubus is the Goblin King's friend. And the only reason he's there is because he's his friend.
Right.
Like
they're just
that's
buds.
more reason to go and all right, dude.
They don't even have a contract. They're just buds.
Yeah, all right, you're dead. All right, I'm just gonna peace out, dude. Like, see you some other time.
Yeah.
It's a tough mod, but it should be rewarded for creativity.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yep,
that's all I gotta say about that.
Anyway, so there it is, DDEX 3-10, Quelling the Horde. Thank you so much for listening to some advice to streamline and run it at your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Toll the Dead for notifications. Check out our Patreon where you can find the playthroughs for these mods at the $5 tier. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And from now until the next time, roll together.